The music was loud, sharp, and joyful, but to Daniel Carter it sounded like noise from another world. He stood just inside the doors of the Grand Hotel ballroom, frozen in place, his heart pounding as if it were trying to escape his chest. Crystal. Lights sparkled above hundreds of smiling faces. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and a live band played a song about love and forever. It was beautiful. It was expensive. And it felt cruel. Only an hour earlier, Daniel had been sitting in a quiet hospital room, holding his daughter's small hand. Lily's skin was pale, her breathing shallow. The doctor's words still echoed in his mind, calm but devastating. The treatment existed. It could save her life. But it had to start soon. And it was costly. Far more than Daniel could ever afford. Daniel was not a careless man. He worked hard, lived simply, and saved what he could. But illness does not wait for the right time. Within weeks, his savings were gone. He sold his car. He borrowed small amounts from friends who had little to spare. Still, it was not enough. There was only one place left to turn. Across the ballroom, Amanda stood in a white dress that probably cost more than Daniel earned in a year. She was smiling, glowing, surrounded by people who praised her happiness. Beside her stood Richard. Hale, tall, confident and proud. He raised his glass as guests cheered. This wedding had been talked about for months. $250,000 spent without hesitation. Daniel knew because Amanda had once mentioned it casually, as if it were nothing. Daniel felt his hands shake. He remembered the conversation from 3 days ago with painful clarity. He had stood in Amanda's living room, choosing his words carefully. He did not accuse her. He did not shout. He told her about Lily's condition, about the treatment, about the time running out. He asked for help, even alone. His voice had broken, but he had kept his pride. Amanda had listened, her face tight. Richard had crossed his arms, already annoyed. "We can't do that," Richard had said. "Everything is tied up in the wedding." Daniel had looked at Amanda then, hoping she would speak. She avoided his eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "We've already committed the money." Committed. The word had cut deep. Daniel had nodded, thanked them, and left. He did not trust himself to stay longer. Now, standing in the ballroom, Daniel felt that moment all over again. The contrast was unbearable. On one side, celebration and excess. On the other, a small hospital room where a little girl fought to stay alive. A wave of anger rose in his chest, hot and sudden. He took a step forward, then stopped. He did not belong here. Not tonight. This was their world now, and he was only a reminder of something they wanted to forget. As if on cue, Amanda noticed him. Her smile faltered for a second. Their eyes met. Daniel searched her face for guilt, for shame, for anything that said she remembered her daughter lying in that hospital bed. What he saw instead was discomfort. Fear, maybe not for Lily, but for the scene Daniel's presence might cause. Amanda leaned toward Richard and whispered something. Richard glanced at Daniel, his expression hardening. He did not wave. He did not nod. He turned away. That was the moment something inside Daniel broke. It was not loud. There was no dramatic collapse. It was quiet, like a door closing for good. He realized then that they had made their choice. Not just with money, but with priorities, with values, with love. Daniel turned and walked out. The hallway outside the ballroom was silent, carpeted, and cold. The music faded behind him as the doors closed. He stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to calm the storm inside his head. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from the hospital. "Lily is asking for you." Daniel did not wait. For the elevator. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his mind racing. On the drive back to the hospital, the city lights blurred past him. Every red light felt like an enemy. Every second felt stolen. When he reached Lily's room, she smiled weakly when she saw him. "Daddy," she said softly. "Did you talk to Mom?" Daniel sat beside her and held her hand. It was warm, fragile, trusting. "Yes," he said after a pause. "I talked to her." Lily nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes. She believed him. She always did. Daniel watched her sleep, listening to the steady rhythm of the machines. The anger returned, slower now, heavier. It settled deep inside him, mixing with fear and grief. He thought of the wedding cake being cut, of laughter, of promises spoken under bright lights. They had everything, and they had chosen not to help. Daniel stared at the wall, his jaw tight. He did not know how yet. He did not know when. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not the end. The night Amanda and Richard chose, celebration over a child's life, was the night they lost, more than they realized. And someday, they would understand exactly what that choice had cost them. Days passed in a blur of white walls, quiet footsteps, and soft beeping sounds. He slept in a chair beside Lily's bed, waking at every small movement. Each morning he hoped for good news, and each morning the doctors spoke carefully. Never. Promising more than they could give. Time was slipping, and Daniel felt it in every breath. Lily tried to stay cheerful. She joked with the nurses, asked for stories, and talked about school as if she would return soon. Daniel smiled for her, but inside he was falling apart. Every laugh from her felt like a gift he might lose. Every cough reminded him of what was at stake. Amanda visited, but not often. When she did, she seemed rushed. Her phone buzzed constantly. She talked about wedding photos, travel plans, and how tired she was. Daniel listened in silence. He watched. Lily's eyes follow her mother, waiting for warmth that never fully arrived. When Amanda left, Lily always asked if she would come back tomorrow. Daniel never answered clearly. At night, when Lily slept, Daniel's thoughts grew darker. He replayed the wedding again and again. The lights, the music, the money spent so easily. He imagined what that money could have done in this hospital room. He told himself not to hate them, but the feeling came anyway, strong and sharp. Then one evening, everything shifted. Daniel stepped into the hallway to take a call. A former co-worker spoke in a low voice, careful but urgent. He mentioned Richard Hale's company. Lawsuits. Hidden problems. Systems failing. The words caught Daniel's attention like a spark in dry wood. After the call ended, Daniel leaned against the wall, his heart racing. He knew those systems. Years ago, he had helped build them. He knew where the cracks were, where things could fall apart if touched the wrong way. That night, Daniel searched quietly. Public records, industry, news. Small hints that, when added together, told a clear story. Richard's company was in trouble. Not tomorrow. Not Sunday. Soon. The realization was terrifying and empowering at the same time. For the first time since the diagnosis, Daniel felt something close to control. The next few days were a battle inside his own mind. Part of him wanted to use this knowledge as a weapon. He imagined refusing to help when Richard came begging. He imagined watching the confident man lose everything. The thought brought a cold sense of satisfaction. But then he would look at Lily. She needed time. She needed treatment. She needed money. Revenge could not save her, unless it was used carefully. Daniel began to plan, not with excitement, but with heavy focus. He listed options in his head. If he walked away, Richard's company might fail on its own. That would feel fair. But Lily would still suffer. If he helped without conditions, nothing would change. They would stay comfortable, and he would stay. Powerless. There had to be another way. Amanda sensed something had changed. She watched Daniel more closely, her eyes searching his face. One afternoon, as Lily slept, Amanda finally spoke. "You seem different," she said. Daniel did not look at her. "I am." She hesitated. "About the wedding." "Don't," Daniel said quietly. The word ended the conversation. Amanda fell silent, guilt flashing across her face before she looked away. That evening, Daniel received the call he had been expecting. It was Richard. His voice was calm, but forced. Too polite. Too careful. "Daniel," he said, "I hear you've been doing consulting work again." Daniel almost laughed. "I haven't." "Well," Richard continued, "we may need someone with your experience. Just for a short time." Daniel stared through the hospital window at the dark sky. He thought of Lily's small hand in his. He thought of the ballroom doors closing behind him. "Why me?" Daniel asked. There was a pause. A long one. "Because you know the system," Richard said. "And if I say no?" Daniel asked. Richard exhaled slowly. "I'd rather not think about that." After the call ended, Daniel sat in silence. The pieces were falling into place faster than he expected. The power he held felt heavy, almost dangerous. For the first time, he understood how easy it was for people to justify bad choices. Richard had justified a wedding over a child's life. Now Daniel was tempted to justify revenge over mercy. He returned to Lily's room. She was awake, watching the ceiling. "Daddy," she said softly. "Are you mad?" Daniel swallowed. "Why? Do you ask? You look like you're thinking very hard." He smiled and brushed her hair back. "I'm just trying to fix something." She nodded, trusting him without question. That trust hurt more than anger ever could. Later that night, Daniel stood alone in the hospital hallway, staring at the floor. He realized revenge was no longer a dream. It was a choice, a path he could step onto with one word. He could punish them for their selfishness, or he could use their fear to save his daughter. The line between justice and revenge blurred, and Daniel knew whatever he chose next would change him forever. As he walked back into Lily's room, one thought stayed with him, clear and steady. If he was going to act, he would do it on his terms. And when the moment came, they would finally understand what it felt like to be powerless. Daniel arrived at the office building just before sunset. The glass walls reflected the orange sky, calm on the outside, hiding panic within. He paused at the entrance, steadying his breath. This was the moment everything had been moving toward. There would be no rewinding it once he stepped inside. The receptionist recognized his name immediately and stood up too fast. She did not smile. She made a call, then asked him to wait. Within seconds, Richard Howley appeared from the hallway. His suit was still sharp, but his confidence was thinner now, stretched and fragile. "Daniel," Richard said, forcing a polite tone. "Thank you for coming." Daniel nodded once and followed him inside without a word. The meeting room was large, clean, and cold. Amanda was already there, sitting with her hands clasped tightly on the table. When she saw Daniel, her eyes widened with relief and fear mixed together. She stood halfway, then slowly sat back down, unsure of what to say. No one spoke at first. Daniel remained standing. He looked at both of them, really looked. The strong man who once dismissed him now avoided eye contact. The woman who once chose comfort over her child now looked desperate. Richard cleared his throat. You know why we called you? Daniel nodded again. Yes. Our systems are failing, Richard said. There are risks. Serious ones. Daniel walked to the window and looked down at the city. Cars moved below, unaware of how small decisions inside this room could change many lives. You knew this was coming, Daniel said calmly. Richard stiffened. We didn't expect it so soon. Daniel turned. Just like Lily. The words landed hard. Amanda's face crumpled. Please, she said softly. This isn't the time. Daniel stepped closer to the table. You're right. The time was weeks ago, when I asked for help. Richard leaned forward. We made a mistake. Daniel's jaw tightened. You made a choice. Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. Richard finally spoke, his voice lower. We need you. Without you, this company won't survive. Daniel studied him. And if it doesn't? Richard hesitated. People lose jobs. Lives are affected. Daniel nodded slowly. Funny, that didn't matter when it was my daughter. Amanda stood up suddenly. Stop, she said, tears forming. I was wrong. I know that now. I think about it every day. Daniel looked at her. Do you? She nodded quickly. I was scared. I didn't want to admit how bad things were. I chose the easy path. Daniel let the words sink in. He felt the anger rise again, sharp and tempting. This was the moment he had imagined alone in hospital hallways. He could walk away now. He could say no and let the consequences fall where they may. Richard broke the tension. Name your terms. The room went still. Daniel took a breath. His heart beat hard, but his voice stayed steady. You will pay for Lily's treatment. All of it. No delays. No excuses. Amanda gasped. Yes, of course. Daniel raised a hand. I'm not finished. Richard nodded, tense. You will put the agreement in writing, Daniel continued. Immediate payment. Direct to the hospital. And you will not present it as charity. This is not generosity. This is responsibility. Richard frowned. That's a lot of money. Daniel met his eyes. You spent more on flowers. Richard looked away. And if we agree? Richard asked. Then I fix your problem, Daniel said. Quietly. Completely. And if we don't? Amanda asked, her voice shaking. Daniel paused. This was the edge. The final step. Then I walk out, he said. And you deal with what comes next. The truth in his voice left no room for doubt. Amanda looked at Richard, panic clear on her face. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly. We'll do it, he said. Daniel did not smile. He pulled a folder from his bag and placed it on the table. I expected that. Richard stared at the folder. You came prepared. Yes, Daniel said, because I couldn't afford hope anymore. Richard opened the folder, scanning the pages. His face tightened as he read. Amanda leaned over his shoulder, her hand covering her mouth. This is very specific, Richard said. It needs to be, Daniel replied. Richard picked up a pen. His hand hesitated for half a second before he signed. Amanda signed next, tears falling onto the paper. When it was done, Daniel collected the documents and placed them back in his bag. I'll start tonight, he said. Richard stood. Thank you. Daniel stopped at the door. Don't thank me. They watched him leave, knowing they had crossed a line they could never uncross. Daniel drove straight to the hospital. The city lights no longer blurred. For the first time in weeks, he felt focused, sharp, awake. He found Lily sleeping peacefully. A nurse smiled when she saw him. "The payment came through," she said quietly. "Treatment begins tomorrow." Daniel closed his eyes, relief washing over him so strongly his knees almost gave out. He sat beside Lily and held her hand. Careful not to wake her. He had won. Something tonight, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. As he watched his daughter breathe, one truth became clear. He had not chosen mercy. He had not chosen revenge. He had chosen necessity. And that choice, heavy and unclean, would stay with him long after this night was over. The hospital felt different once the treatment began. The fear did not disappear, but it loosened its grip. Nurses moved with purpose. Doctors spoke with cautious hope instead of careful silence. Machines still hummed, but now they sounded like progress instead of countdowns. Daniel noticed every small change, every number on every screen, watching as if his attention alone could protect Lily. The first days were hard. Lily was tired, quiet, and weak. Daniel stayed beside her, reading stories, talking about normal things, holding her hand through the long hours. He did not think about Richard or Amanda. For the first time in weeks, revenge stepped out of his mind and survival took its place. Slowly, signs of improvement appeared. Lily smiled more. She asked for real food again. One morning she sat up, by herself, proud and stubborn. The doctors remained careful, but Daniel saw it in their eyes. Hope was no longer a fragile idea. It was becoming real. Richard kept his word. Money arrived on time. No delays, no questions. Lawyers handled the paperwork. Daniel never spoke to Richard again except through short professional messages. He fixed the systems, solved the problems, and left no trace of himself behind. Harley Biomedical stabilized. The crisis faded quietly, just as Daniel had promised. Amanda tried to come more often after that. At first, Daniel kept his distance. He allowed her to visit Lily, but he stayed silent, watching. Amanda brought books, small gifts, and forced smiles. She spoke softly, as if volume alone could fix what had been broken. One afternoon, when Lily was resting, Amanda finally spoke. "I was wrong," she said. "I know saying it doesn't fix anything." Daniel nodded but did not respond. "I was afraid," she continued. "I didn't want to face the truth. I chose comfort instead of courage." Daniel looked at her then. He saw real regret, not panic, not excuses. Still, something inside him remained guarded. She almost paid for that choice. He said quietly. Amanda lowered her head. "I know." That was all. No shouting, no forgiveness. Just truth, heavy and plain. Weeks passed. Lily's strength returned. Piece by piece. She walked the hallway holding Daniel's hand. She laughed again, full and bright. The day she was cleared to go home, Daniel cried for the first time since everything began. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep and shaking. Life did not become perfect after that. Daniel returned to work. Bills still came. Nights were still long, but the fear that once ruled him no longer had control. Lily slept in her own bed again, the nightlight glowing softly in her room. One evening, Daniel received a final message from Richard. The company was stable. Investors were satisfied. Everything was back on track. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. He felt no joy, no pride, no sense of victory, only emptiness. He realized then that revenge had never been his true goal. Control had been. He had wanted to take back something the world had ripped from him. Power, safety, certainty. But power came at a cost. There were nights when Daniel replayed that meeting in his mind. He wondered what would have happened if he had walked away. If Lily would still be alive. If he could have lived with that choice. He did not know. What he did know was this. Forcing someone to do the right thing did not feel like justice. It felt like pressure. Necessary, but heavy. Amanda continued to try. She showed up consistently. She listened more than she spoke. Slowly, Lily began to trust her again. Daniel watched carefully, always ready to step in. Forgiveness did not arrive. Suddenly, it came in small pieces. In shared hospital memories. In quiet conversations. In effort, not words. One night, Daniel sat alone on the porch, the air cool and still. He thought about how close he had come to letting anger decide everything. How easy it would have been to destroy instead of demand responsibility. He understood. Now that revenge does not heal. It only balances pain for a moment. True healing comes from choosing life. Even when anger feels easier. Daniel looked through the window at Lily sleeping peacefully. He had saved her life. But the cost was not money. It was the part of himself that would never see the world as fair again. And maybe that was the real consequence. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Just the quiet knowledge that doing what must be done can still leave scars. As Daniel turned off the porch light and went inside, he accepted that truth without regret. Revenge had opened the door. Love had walked him through it. And in the end, that was enough.